There's not a more important role in existence than educating the next generations, and yet you have most teachers living in poverty.
Right.
You have people like Jeff Bezos, who's poised to be the world's first trillionaire, and most of his employees are making minimum wage, and they're not paying taxes. So your workforce is making minimum wage and paying a gross percentage of that to taxes, state and federal income tax. And meanwhile, Amazon, $900 billion company, is paying no federal tax. And on the reverse of that, they're getting subsidized. Cities and towns are giving them all kinds of options to bring them to their communities at the expense of the taxpayer. So not only are we not paying our workers a living wage, but we are also subsidizing these grossly rich individuals. And this isn't a Democrat or Republican problem. This is a problem that has been consistent through my lifetime, and this is why CalExit is such an enticing possibility, because if we start fresh, we have the opportunity to restructure a system that works for everyone and not just the select few.
Absolutely. Now, what would that look like?
Well, it depends on the communities. You know, our mindset is so completely conditioned by the institutions that we live under that we don't even have the language to talk about what the solution looks like. We have an incredible amount of very intelligent people who are conditioned by a system to think and behave in a specific way. And it's because of that conditioning, because of the institutions that control public discourse, that people's immediate response to these problems is denial. Nobody wants to see behind the curtain. They're happy with their blinders on. As long as they have what they need, then nothing else really matters. And that's by design.
Right.
Right? The people who are privileged, who inherited money, who never had to worry about where their next meal was coming from, or having their power turned off, or being evicted, those people never had to worry about those things, have no context for those who do. And the ones who have all the money have no motivation to change the system because it's benefiting them. So we have to reframe the conversation, and we have to figure out a way to make the haves empathize with the have-nots.
Right.
And
absolutely.
Right now, this myth that's perpetuated by almost every institution that we live under, that you can work hard and pull yourself up by your bootstraps, that's true for some people, but I can speak from personal experience that working very, very hard will only do so much, especially if you're flagrant in your spending, or if you are allured by credit cards.
Right, right.
You get burdened with this debt with a usurious interest rate. You're never going to escape.
Now, a couple things I want to mention since you brought up credit cards. I want to mention first that there is a war on America going on, and it's reflected in this freezing of accounts at Bank of America. They're freezing accounts over questions of citizenship, and that's going to hurt mostly people here in California because we have a huge immigrant population, and they are part of our workforce. And our workforce is what keeps up our economy, and it's the businesses that really pay more in taxes than the rest of us. Businesses pay more than individuals in taxes, and so that's I think that I see conspiracy here of our government, on our government's part. They're making war on California in particular, and also on another front, they're making war, and that is against our net neutrality laws here in California. And also, there was one more. They're looking to restrict our state rights to make laws regarding legalizing marijuana. So these are all fronts on which they're really making war just against California.
Yeah, I mean those are all very good examples of why California is experiencing a surge in the desire for secession, and part of the reason why California is one of the leading voices in the secessionist movement globally is because of that capability. We differ from Catalan in that way. Catalan is a very wealthy part of Spain, and obviously what we've seen in Madrid's response to the Catalonian secession is clear that the oligarchy does not want Catalan to be independent, and they're doing everything they can to undermine the vote that just occurred. The referendum that passed by an overwhelming majority, it was like 94% of the Catalan people voted for secession, and it was met with a very heavy hand. You have misinformation campaigns all around the world that aim to undermine these movements. California is no different. I believe that Tim Draper's most recent effort was specifically designed to muddy the water and to confuse people about what, yes, California is trying to do. And the fact that the California Supreme Court pulled the initiative is a clear indicator that they didn't actually want that initiative. They just wanted to muddy the water. And so that's why, yes, California pulled the initiative and announced the new initiative, the third rendition. And, as the director of communications for Yes California, I can tell you that prior to Tim Draper's 3-state solution, I was able to gather signatures like crazy. And as soon as Tim Draper's initiative came out, people were against it. They didn't want Cal exit because they thought it was the 3-state solution. And so we had to spend time educating people, and, that undermined the momentum that we had gathered. So this current initiative is part of the reason why California's secession movement is taking center stage. We are advocating for retrocession of public land to indigenous nations of California, and the unratified treaties that have never been honored give us moral and legal high ground, and the reception that we've received from the global indigenous movement is very promising. And we've been contacted by secessionist movements that are being run by indigenous people all over the world, most notably in Ecuador, where the Amazonian peoples want independence from Quito because of extractive capitalism. They come into the indigenous areas and take the natural resources and destroy the environment, and the indigenous people get no benefit from that. So the same problems that we're experiencing here in California are mirrored all over the world, and it's colonialism that's the problem. You have an entity like England, like France, like Holland, like the United States that goes to foreign lands, controls the people, and extracts the resources and keeps all the wealth for themselves. And I don't care how you slice it politically, it's the same problem everywhere. And until we as a woke global citizenry demand accountability from our quote-unquote leadership, nothing is going to change.
Right. Absolutely right. We're gonna, we need change, and we need to trigger that change by doing something. And I agree that the only thing, or the one thing that has a chance, is this push for secessionism, because it's the only thing that will let politicians know that we expect better. And the only politicians that we can trust to believe that message from this point on, because here in California, in my mind, is going to be California politicians that we elect in the future, and not the ones who are currently sitting on Capitol Hill and protecting a rapist and protecting big CEOs of companies like Nike, who are getting away with messing up the reputation of all of America by running sweatshops overseas and, kind of pretending to support a message of equality for all Americans. And other CEOs who are billionaires and becoming trillionaires and living off the pain and suffering of their employees who have nothing and are just managing from day to day to feed themselves and maybe their children too. And, meanwhile, they're stealing from these people who are just barely getting by. They're rolling back welfare programs like the ones that Obama put into place for affordable health care. And they're rolling back protections for our environment that are keeping us, from breathing and drinking sludge. Because what we do in other places, whether or not we're deforesting here in America or overseas somewhere, that's affecting us here in America. It's changing air quality here in America because we're not putting the air in a jar, in a bell jar, and looking at it. It's blowing around. We can't stop it from blowing around and permeating other countries and our own country as well. So if you want clean air and water, people, vote for it and check out the secessionist movement that's now going on globally, because people simply can't tolerate anymore our capitalistic and greedy oligarchy. This patriarchal oligarchy made up of the worst of our society. John, I'm sorry I interrupted you with all that. I know that was a lot